there's a number of different ways that one can come, if you will, into sustainability. But if that is your first job, and you want your first job to be in sustainability, then generally speaking, it's in the reporting or data world. And it could be, reporting as in helping to communicate whatever projects or results.
Welcome to Grounded, the Sustainable Business and Careers podcast, where we explore how professionals, especially those early in their careers, can shape their work to include making a positive impact on the planet. I'm Michael Jordan, a professor of management and sustainable business at the University of Oregon's Lundquist College of Business. Grounded is an independent production informed by my work at the university, but not an official U of O program. This podcast is part of my personal mission to help the next generation of business leaders build meaningful careers, and to show that the methods of good business are also the methods of sustainable progress. Each episode, I talk with leaders, innovators, and frontline staff, sharing ideas and insights you can use to shape your own path. Let's get started.
Energy demand is through the roof. AI is really pushing the boundaries, the limits of here in the US of our grid.
Today, I'm joined by Cynthia Curtis, someone whose career really shows how sustainability can start as a personal value and become the defining characteristic of a successful career in multiple senior business roles. Cynthia started out in marketing, and over the years, she's led corporate sustainability and ESG efforts at major companies, including JLL, CA Technologies, and more recently, Revantage, which is part of Blackstone's real estate portfolio. There, she helped build the global ESG function from the ground up and drive decarbonization across properties worldwide. She now serves on boards and advises companies on their sustainability strategies. What's great about Cynthia's perspective is that it bridges personal interests, the corporate world, nonprofits, and the investor side, giving her a rare, authentic, big picture view of how sustainability is evolving globally and here in the US. We'll talk about Cynthia's career path, her thoughts on how people in non-sustainability roles can support sustainability, and how she's seen the conversation around ESG and investors' expectations shift. Cynthia, thanks for joining me. I'm really glad you're here.
Thanks, Michael. It's great to be here with you.
Right on. Well, let's just jump right into it. As I mentioned, at least as far as I know, you started out in marketing roles before focusing professionally on sustainability. Can you give us a little bit of your just career path and some highlights?
Sure. Yes. And thank you for that very generous intro. I think my career, if you were to just kind of look at it on paper, you might think that's a rather circuitous route that I took. But there was always a common thread throughout for me. As you say, I did start the first half of my career was primarily in marketing, strategic marketing and communications. Um, but even kind of before that, I worked for a U.S. senator, and so I had that kind of flavor, if you will, um, and which was fascinating. But I thought if I stay here too much longer, I'm going to be a lobbyist, and I just couldn't bear the thought. So then I went and got an MBA and 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 kind of moved more in that direction of business and of shaping the decisions as opposed to kind of responding to them. And I I always wanted to work in a global kind of business setting. I had done the Eurail pass after college and stayed and so my MBA was an international degree and then I went and lived in Europe for a few years. Um, and then, coming back to the US and working, as you say, in a global marketing role for a tech company, I started hearing from our customers that, your stuff is just sucking up too much energy, which is costing us too much money. And there were rumblings about, if you will, kind of sustainability type actions, considerations in Congress, but they weren't really calling it sustainability at the time. And I thought there's something interesting percolating here. So I had seen an inconvenient truth and decided that I really did need to make a shift. I loved marketing and I loved my job, but I thought I need something that feels more visceral, viscerally important to me. And so I decided to pivot, gave myself 6 months and to find this. And then a position opened up at CA Technologies and for strategy and communications for sustainability. And I thought, well, I can do that. I really relied on all of that experience with setting strategies and marketing and listening to the customer and all of that. I leveraged that as I learned the new role.
What are the first jobs that relate to sustainability now? Are they reporting and carbon accounting, or thinking of other fields? But what do you think
Yeah.
people's
Well,
first
the
jobs
funny
will be?
thing is, or interesting, is that I don't think there's any other function, corporate function, where the people who come into the function could come from any number of
Mhm.
areas of expertise, right? So if it's carbon accounting, you actually have to have a really good handle on numbers and analytics and data crunching and all of that, in addition to understanding, what the, different scopes of emissions are, et cetera. But um, there are tremendous numbers of roles for and needs for data analytics, data collection, and the analysis. How do you take that and create something actionable and meaningful out of it? I mean, how to leverage AI, right? Because that's a real disintermediator, if you will. But how do you leverage AI so that you are bringing the wisdom to
Mhm.
whatever the function is within sustainability, or any other function. But how do
Mhm.
you leverage that so it's working for you and it's not supplanting you in your role?
What have you asked folks in, your corporate colleagues to do that after a time, the more they started to understand where sustainability was creating value, the easier that became. But I'm looking for things you wish finance people or accounting or other folks would have known, that would have made things go faster.
Okay. Um, So what's interesting is, and I wouldn't have it any other way, is that if you're going to an investment committee, for example, to ask for approval of a particular project, there are a number of requirements, data points that you need to be sharing. It should be the same and it typically is the same as
Mhm.
any other investment that the company is looking to make, right? What's the upfront cost? What's the payback? Um, what's the ROI? What is the demand? Is this an internal push? Is this an external pull? All of those things are questions that you would be and should be asked regardless of whatever the investment is. And it's important that if you're asking for a sustainability, an investment for a sustainability project, that you're on that same kind of footing. The one thing that I would say is that in certain circumstances where you're talking about energy efficiencies or a new technology that, utilization of a smart technology that's going to reduce water consumption or enable greater visibility into waste so that you can ultimately reduce waste. Those those types of investment are almost a guarantee. It's swapping out, and for those that are even exists anymore, non-LEDs, putting those in place, there is an immediate payback. It starts to return immediately on turning on the switch, right? So in terms of like a hurdle rate, I think those investments and those project requests can be, if you will, risk adjusted so that it doesn't have the same necessarily that same risk factor in terms of determining the hurdle rate that another investment that does not have as clear a payback and as clear a time frame would have.
Yeah, I always feel like up and down the line for accounting functions, the 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 approval tests um, need to be paid close attention to, right? I think you tend to, in ABC company, you tend to have short-term payback requirements or um, a lot of focus on first cost for new investments that I would wish that finance and accounting functions, um, I don't know, maybe they don't need to change the rules just for sustainability, but having rules that account for longer term benefits, uh, whether it's net present value or other sort of more creative ways of approving investments might sometimes make sense. I don't know.
The more that I understand the business and the mechanics of the business and putting things in framing those discussions and having those conversations in the framework that exists already in the company rather than trying to, be the salmon swimming upstream,
Hmm.
the better chance I'm going to have of being successful in moving the needle,
Okay.
you know?
So you've worked at pretty big global companies and you were talking earlier about going to business school and a global program and living abroad. I'm wondering, to shift gears, it does seem like sustainability naturally lends itself to a global perspective. Um, how has that played out for you? Have you had to experience tailoring strategies or sustainability initiatives for different parts of global businesses? When you go to conferences or talk to colleagues in different parts of the world, what do you notice as what's the global aspect of the job? What do you notice as something that's different or a different priority in another part of the world compared to the US?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and great question because I mean, the climate is global. The wind blows, airstreams flow, the oceans flow. Um, it's a global issue that has to be addressed globally, but it's also very local. An example I have it, and it's from a few years ago, but um, it still holds true. The lessons I think still hold true. We had a company that I worked for. The largest number of employees were um, in a in India and in Hyderabad, and there was some food insecurity, and it was a 24/7 thing, and so there was people would be sleeping there in bunks and all of that, and the cafeteria. Um, was a buffet thing, and we had composting for, we had a whole worm farm and all of that, and that was great. But I'm like, yeah, but the deal is we're not actually trying to make the worms fat and happy. We're trying to actually,
Mhm.
kind of reduce the food consumption and the food waste. Um, and so, there were a number of different things that we were looking at because we were throwing out, feeding a lot of worms. And one of the folks there, this was not me, this was somebody there who said, okay, how about if we weigh it? And so just on this like whiteboard, puts up a sign at the beginning of the buffet line that says, last week we threw out X kilograms of food waste that would have fed Y numbers of people.
Mhm.
And that was it. And then people started taking less because they would, you go through buffet, you're kind of loading
Yeah.
up your plate and then you don't eat it all. So then they started taking less and less and less. So it took 3 weeks of that reporting for the amount of food waste to decrease almost by a third.
Oh, wow.
It was right. And it was the simplest thing, but and a really important lesson of what really matters to the people that you're actually trying to engage.
Hmm.
And how is it best communicated? And what are the things that you can do that would resonate more with them?
Makes sense.
So
So, I mean, this conversation is taking place in a context that is really different from when we started working on sustainability and in our past corporate roles. Um, and so it makes me just wonder, what advice would you have to businesses in the US today, given current politics and climate? To what should companies be doing differently, if anything, with regard to sustainability now, as compared to the rest of the world and what they're doing, and our own context, and compared to things that we've done in the past? What's your advice for companies now?
yeah. I mean it's a challenging time. There's no avoiding that. Um, Although, as we've talked about earlier, it is a global issue, um, and it's not just not just talking about climate. Um, and so, first of all, from a business standpoint, there's never been a company that I've worked with, and I'm quite sure you would say the same, Michael, that that has zero efficiencies that can be found. Everybody has them somewhere, right? Some are more pronounced, some are more significant, but there are efficiencies to be had and found everywhere. And efficiencies equal cost savings. Um, so that's kind of one piece of it. You're going to just continue to do that. Any business that is looking at the bottom line is going to do that anyway. And so the cheapest energy right now, frankly, is solar. Um, but regardless, you need an all of the above, if you will, kind of energy source. So you're going to keep on keeping on, in terms of trying to um, satisfy those needs. And why would you pay more for something if you didn't have to? So So that's just gonna continue. Um, Similarly, there are um, uh, uh, there are new products, new services, new requirements that this kind of economy that we're in and the changing climate is driving. And so you're not going to sit on the sidelines if you've got some kind of innovation that can result in um, a waste reduction of some kind, right? You wouldn't do that. And so it's frankly, it's just about, I think, continuing to look for those areas of investment in innovation and look for those areas of savings and recognizing that the fundamentals of business haven't changed. There's too much of a movement. There's too much of a recognition that there are, and there are too many companies globally that are all in, and they're seeing the financial benefit of new innovations or efficiency gains. They're not going to change. So if you're a US business, you're competing against that, So I guess um I guess I would say in many ways it's kind of a stay the course, but I do recognize that you need to be smart about that in terms of how loud and you kind of broadcast and the language that you use.
Hmm.
It just I think does I can appreciate that that needs to be um, shifted a little bit. But in many ways, it's shifting to just be more about the economics.
Will changing politics change what investors ask for, or does it really just change the language of ESG to be something else? I'm just wondering about where we haven't really relied on investors to to prompt and ask companies to change practices. Is that dynamic changing?
Yeah, I do think, people are backing off a bit, um, in some cases, a lot of how what they're asking for, investors and what they're actually asking for, but they are still looking at risk, what the risk profile is, and digging into that.
That you brought up an inconvenient truth. And I remember at the time, right, there were not only was the movie out, but wasn't there an organization that you could kind of be part of and people would give presentations? Did you do that as
Yep.
well?
And it
Okay.
still is in existence. It's
Oh,
still going strong. Climate reality, I
hmm.
think. Um, yeah. And I did take part in that, and with my good pal Ann Kelly from
Huh.
Ceres, we did a joint presentation at um, one of their kind of big gatherings.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wonder because I'm not aware of a sort of an equivalent now, right? Because it seems like we kept building on what started with an inconvenient truth and that part of the movement. It almost feels like we need a refresher movement, inconvenient truth too or something.
I think Inconvenient Truth too was kind of Greta.
Okay, yeah,
We just recently had the passing of Jane Goodall.
yeah.
Um, the lessons that can be learned from her are almost innumerable, right?
Hmm.
But one of her quotes, so many, one of her one of the quotes that she said was, everyone makes an impact, and this may not be exact. Everyone makes an impact um, every day. And we just need to determine what kind of impact that will be.
Yeah.
I, that just, I think that's just so powerful in its simplicity.
hmm hmm
Uh,
It speaks to kind of being deliberate. Yeah.
right. Right. And it speaks to like if you're coming out of school and you're wondering, what am I going to do? What job am I going to take? And all of that. Well, you don't have to have, as I said, you don't have to have the sustainability title in your role. It doesn't have to be
hmm
that. There are a number of things that can be done in any number of different functions that can be that impact.
Cynthia, I've really appreciated our conversation and having you on the podcast. I think your experience is going to be invaluable for my students and others in their early careers to hear about and understand how to integrate sustainability with their jobs. So thank you again for being a guest on the podcast.
It has been my pleasure. Thank you.